The dog was in my chair, not the fancy one by the table, not the new leather recliner Daniel bought last year. My chair, the wooden one by the window. The one I built myself back in 1987, when the house was still mine in every sense that mattered. Rusty, our golden retriever, was curled up on the old beige blanket Lisa always left there. His tail flicked once, lazily, as if he owned the spot. Around him, the room was full of warmth, the smell of roasted chicken, the soft jazz Lisa played from her phone, the laughter of people who didn't notice I was standing at the door. "Better not move him, Dad," Daniel said without looking up from his plate. His tone was polite but distant, the kind of politeness that feels like a wall. "He likes to stay close to Lisa." Lisa chuckled, her bracelets chiming. "You can sit in the kitchen, Joe," she said, smiling without warmth. "But put something down first. We don't want that work smell on the chairs." The words landed harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as she did. Her perfume, lavender fields, filled the air. The same smell I'd been trying to ignore for months. I stood there for a moment, just long enough to see Evan glance up from his phone. My grandson's eyes met mine, confused, apologetic. But he didn't say a word. I walked to the kitchen without answering. The tile was cold beneath my boots, the kind of cold that seeps through even the thickest socks. I took a plate, filled it quietly, and sat at the small table by the window. From there, I could still hear their laughter, muffled through the doorway, distant and sharp. Every clink of a fork against porcelain sounded like a reminder. I didn't belong here anymore. The only company I had was the clock above the stove, ticking loud and steady, each second breaking the silence into smaller pieces. My fork scraped the plate. In that rhythm, clink, scrape, clink, something in me hardened. It wasn't anger, not yet, just a cold awareness, slow and quiet, like rust forming where the paint starts to crack. Some people lose their place long before they notice it's gone. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own home, tell me where you're watching from. I suppose I should start a few minutes earlier, before the chair, before the silence, before I realized how far gone things were. It was already dark when I got off the bus from Eastman Foundry. 10 hours of standing by the presses, the smell of burned iron clinging to my clothes like a shadow that wouldn't wash away. My back hurt more than usual, and the December wind cut through my jacket as I walked up Willow Creek Lane. The houses were glowing with Christmas lights, reds, greens, and soft golds blinking in rhythm. Every porch seemed to hold warmth that didn't belong to me. From the gate, I heard laughter. Daniel's deep voice, Lisa's sharp one, the cheerful bark of Rusty, the sound of a family having dinner. My family, or at least it used to be. When I opened the door, the air hit me, rich with food and wine and that perfume Lisa bought downtown. There were half-empty glasses of Briar Hill Pinot Noir on the table, candles flickering beside them. I hung my jacket by the door and waited for someone to notice me. "Hey, Dad," Daniel said eventually, eyes still on his phone. "Long day?" "Same as usual," I answered, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "Machines don't stop breaking just because it's Christmas." Lisa's laugh was soft but cutting. "You should retire already. Daniel says they keep you around out of pity." She said it like a joke, but no one laughed. Not even Daniel. He just shifted in his chair, uncomfortable for a moment, then poured himself more wine. I stood there, the cold still clinging to my sleeves. The chair by the window, my chair, looked so small from across the room. Rusty lifted his head, eyes sleepy, and then settled back down. That's when Daniel told me not to move him. Maybe it was nothing to them. Maybe they didn't even notice the way my shoulders stiffened or how I stood there, plate in hand, trying to decide whether to speak or stay silent. I chose silence. It was easier. It always was. Back in the kitchen, I watched the snow start to fall through the window. The glass was fogged at the corners, and beyond it, the streetlights turned the air a dull orange. I could see my reflection faintly. An old man in a work jacket, sitting alone, eating dinner at a table meant for leftovers, When I was younger, I used to imagine old age as something peaceful. Slow mornings, quiet afternoons, grandchildren laughing in the yard. Not this. Not being invisible in the house I built with my own hands. I remembered the first time I carried Eleanor, my late wife, across this very threshold. She was laughing, holding the key up like a trophy. That laughter had filled every wall, every empty space. It was the sound of belonging. Now the same walls echoed with a different kind of noise, the sound of comfort that didn't include me. From the living room came another burst of laughter. Glenn Moore, Lisa's father, telling one of his stories. The man had a voice that carried like a trumpet and an ego to match. He was in my chair now, the one that used to be mine before Rusty claimed it. I could picture him there, leaning back, drink in hand, talking loud enough for the whole street to hear. I took a slow bite, forcing the food down. Somewhere in the middle of that silence, Evan appeared at the doorway. He didn't say anything, just looked at me for a few seconds, then back toward the living room. His face said more than words could. He saw it too, the smallness of it all, the quiet cruelty. Then he went back to his room. When I finished eating, I washed my plate and left it on the rack to dry. My hands were shaking a little, not from anger but from the weight of it, the knowing that nothing I said would matter. So I said nothing. I went to my room, changed into my flannel shirt, and sat on the edge of the bed. The sounds from downstairs drifted up. Laughter, the TV, the faint ring of glasses. I stared at the floor for a long time before turning off the light. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay there thinking about how slowly things disappear, how love doesn't vanish all at once, but piece by piece, like dust collecting on an old photograph. And I wondered when exactly I had stopped being part of the picture. It's strange how a house can keep the same shape, the same windows, and still stop feeling like home. That realization came one night at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered through the hallway barefoot. The air was cold enough to sting. My steps were slow, careful, as if I were walking through a stranger's place. The photos on the wall caught my eye. The family pictures that once told our story. They weren't there anymore. Where there had been a photo of me and Eleanor on our 30th anniversary, there was now a framed print of a beach sunset, generic and soulless. Where Daniel's graduation picture used to hang, now there was some modern abstract art Lisa must have bought online. My chest tightened. I followed the empty spots like a trail until I reached the end of the hallway. On the small table beneath the window, there had been a photo of Eleanor in her garden, her hands covered in soil, her smile so alive you could almost hear it. Gone. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and Rusty's breathing from the living room. That silence used to comfort me once. Now it pressed down like a weight. I walked into the garage, guided only by the thin moonlight leaking through the window. The smell of motor oil and dust was thick. It felt familiar, safe in a way the rest of the house didn't anymore. That's where I found them. Inside a cardboard box, tucked behind an old toolbox. The missing photos. Dust clung to the frames, the glass fogged from years of neglect. I wiped one clean with my sleeve. Eleanor was looking back at me from Ocean City, her hair caught by the wind, that same soft smile that used to pull the corners of my world back into place. I whispered, "They won't erase you. Not from this house, not from me." My voice trembled. I hadn't said her name out loud in months. Saying it felt like opening a door I thought had rusted shut. A few days later, I overheard Lisa talking from the living room. Her voice carried easily. She never cared to lower it when she spoke about me. "Honestly, Daniel, we could clear out half this stuff. Have a yard sale or something. The house looks like a museum for things nobody wants." Daniel's answer was a sigh, then, "He'd lose it, Lisa. You know how sentimental he gets." Sentimental. It's a strange word when used as an insult. I stayed quiet in my room, listening as their voices faded into another conversation. About bills, about plans, about things that didn't include me. There was a small box on my dresser where I kept the key to the shed, some coins, and an old lighter Eleanor had given me on our 10th anniversary. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling the engraving she had scratched into the metal. Still ours. For a moment, I could almost hear her laugh again, light and clear, echoing down the hallway. But it wasn't there. Just the low hum of the heating vent and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Every morning after that felt heavier. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee, not the strong, bitter kind Eleanor used to brew, but Lisa's expensive blend with hints of vanilla and hazelnut. Even the air smelled artificial now. I tried to make small talk with Daniel one morning. He was reading the paper at the table, glasses sliding down his nose. "Suppose you've got a big week ahead?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Busy," he said. "Market's picking up again." I waited, hoping for another word, a question, something. But that was it. He folded the paper, stood up and left. Rusty followed him out the door. When the silence returned, I looked around the kitchen. Every object told a quiet story of being replaced. New curtains, new plates, new everything. My wife's old teacup set, the one with the little blue flowers, was gone. I found it later in the basement wrapped in newspaper, like something meant to be forgotten. Lisa called it updating. I called it erasing. At night, when the laughter from their room drifted down the hallway, I'd lie awake thinking about how easily a person could vanish from their own life. You don't need to die for it to happen. Sometimes it's just the world moving on without asking your permission. One evening, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a small glass of water. I was staring at the window, but not really seeing it. My reflection looked older than I remembered. The lines under my eyes were deeper, the grey in my beard thicker, but behind that tired face there was still something, a quiet pulse, a stubbornness that refused to fade. It was then, in that stillness, that the thought came to me. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. If they could erase Eleanor from these walls, they could erase me too, piece by piece, until one day there'd be no sign that I ever lived here, and I couldn't let that happen. This house was more than wood and brick. It was our history. Every nail I drove, every wall I painted, every crack in the floor held a piece of us. I wasn't ready to surrender that to someone who thought sentimental meant weak. That night, before I went to bed, I took one of Eleanor's photos from the box in the garage and placed it back on the hallway wall, right where it used to be. It was small, but it was mine. I stood there for a while, watching the picture in the dim light. Her eyes seemed to shine just a little brighter under the lamp. Maybe it was my imagination, or maybe she was still here, reminding me that dignity doesn't die quietly. As I turned off the light, I whispered again, "They won't erase you." But this time, the words carried something else inside them. A promise, not just a defense. The house settled into silence, the kind that hums deep in the walls. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and slow. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. The silence wasn't just around me anymore. It was inside me, gathering strength. The factory has its own weather. Heat hugs the ceiling and drip sweats down the steel beams. Air trembles with the thud of presses, a heartbeat too big for a human chest. When the furnaces breathe out, the smell of burned iron moves through the aisles like a storm front. You taste it on your tongue, bitterness and grit, long before your shift begins. 10 hours under that sky, and you learn to make silence inside your head. I kept my silence in a pocket notebook, black cover, elastic band, pages that felt too clean for the life I was living. On the first page I wrote, in block letters, property, law, proof. The words looked like scaffolding. I'd been a man who built things with his hands. It felt right to start with a framework, even if what I was building this time couldn't be measured with a tape. At the punch press, where the sheet metal flashed like fish scales, I wrote between cycles, title deed, where is original? Mail, keep copies. Witnesses, neighbors, Evan, A foreman waved past, and I slid the notebook behind my badge. When he'd gone, I brought it back out and added another line. Memory fails where paper doesn't. It wasn't poetry, but it was true. Daniel and Lisa had turned every conversation into steam. You could see it rise, then it vanished. Paper stayed. By midday, sweat soaked my collar. My hands shook, not from age, not from effort, but from a new kind of clarity. I watched the younger guys swap jokes over their lunches, the same jokes every day, language of survival. I ate in the tool room, where it smelled like oil and old leather. I opened the notebook and drew the house from memory. The front porch, 3 planks that creaked, the window by my chair, the corridor where I'd replaced the photo of Eleanor. Under the drawing I wrote, "They move things. I move paper." A machinist named Julio came in for a torque wrench. He nodded like men do when they respect your quiet. "Long day, Mr. Benton." "Long's not the problem," I said. "Pointless is." He laughed and left with his wrench, and the door shut with a soft hydraulic sigh. I stared at the sketch until the lines stopped shaking. Then I added the date, the time, my initials. Small habits become anchors. Every shift has a rhythm. The shop whistle, the lunch buzzer, the long tunnel of the last 2 hours, where everyone stands a little closer to the clock. I filled that tunnel with lists, utilities. Whose name? Insurance? Mailing address change? Basement boxes? Inventory? The pen dug grooves into the paper. I imagined the words as rivets, hammered in, holding. By the time the whistle blew, the notebook felt heavier. I slipped it into my breast pocket, near my heart. The weight steadied me. Outside, the evening air had the kind of cold that stung clean. I liked that feeling. It made everything honest. On the bus home, lights skittered across the windows, the city a smear of neon and frost. I watched my reflection float over it. An old man in a work jacket, eyes tired, mouth set. I touched the notebook through my coat. Paper warmed slowly, like a small animal. At home, the warmth smelled artificial. Candle sweet, wine heavy, controlled. Laughter rose from the living room. TV glowed, dancing on the wall like a party I hadn't been invited to. I hung my jacket and went straight to my room. Closed the door as gently as I could, because even in exile, you learn not to make noise. The Dell Inspiron took its time waking up. The fan groaned, the screen flickered, the keyboard's letters shone with the thin gloss of overuse. I typed with the care of someone stepping across black ice. Pennsylvania homeowner rights, then elder abuse housing, then tenant eviction laws, Scranton. Each search result opened a corridor of words I didn't fully understand. But I'd walked worse corridors, mine shafts of grief after Eleanor died, hallways of hospital noise, the long passage of months where your name is spoken like a duty rather than a love. I read until the words stopped swimming. I copied down phrases into the notebook. Quiet title, unlawful detainer, right to exclude, notice requirements. The language tasted like metal. I didn't need to love it, I needed to use it. From the living room, glasses clinked, a sitcom laugh track rose and fell, and someone, Glenn probably, told a story that ended in a bark of self-approval. The sound came through the vent, thin as wire. I backspaced and retyped a sentence 3 times before it sat straight. I found a forum where a woman in Allentown wrote about moving her father into a studio apartment after his son started treating him like furniture. Another post linked to a county resource page for seniors. I wrote down 2 phone numbers and a name. Legal aid, ask for intake. The phrase paper trail came up again and again. I glanced at the file folder on my desk, receipts, copies of utility bills, the hospital report with Dr. Elkins's signature from last year's checkup. I added dividers. House, health, mail. The click of the metal tabs was small, but it sounded like a lock sliding into place. I kept the lights low. The computer screen cast a blue square onto my hands, making the veins glow like map lines. I imagined each vein leading to something I still controlled. The shed key, the bank statement, the photo I'd put back on the wall. Control, is a modest thing at first. It grows. A door creaked in the hallway. Footsteps paused outside my room. Lisa's voice, syrupy soft. "Are you still up, Joe? Maybe get some sleep. You sound restless lately." Restless. Another word turned into a diagnosis. I waited, let the silence thicken, then said, "Research." "For what?" she asked. "For what belongs to me." The words came out calm. I surprised myself. She didn't answer. The steps moved away just a touch faster than they'd come. I wrote that down too, with the time. It's not paranoia when you've learned how quickly stories can be rewritten. The clock on my desk ticked toward midnight. I printed 2 pages, definitions, timelines. The printer grumbled, spat them out with the warm breath of a small animal. I slipped them into the folder. When I labeled the spine with a strip of masking tape, Benton House Rights, my hand steadied completely. I shut down the computer and let the room return to dark. In the half-light, the mirror over the dresser held my shape. I stepped closer until I could see everything the daytime washes away. The silver at my temples, the thin white line on my jaw from the fight I broke up in the yard 30 years ago, the tiny freckle in my left eye Eleanor once called her North Star. The man in the mirror looked tired. He did not look small. "Hello," I told him softly. It felt ridiculous, then necessary. "You're not done yet." The house crackled as it settled. Rusty barked once in his sleep, a muffled, innocent sound. Somewhere, a pipe shivered. I put the notebook on the dresser, closed, elastic band pulled tight. I turned Eleanor's photo to face the door and laid my palm against the glass. Cool, smooth, solid. When I lay down, I didn't count breaths. I counted steps. From my bed to the file folder, from the file folder to the bus stop, from the bus stop to a door with a name on it. I didn't know the name yet, just that it would belong to someone who could translate metal language into human terms. Sleep came like a slow elevator, stopping at every floor of memory. At each stop, I decided to keep something. My name, my house, my wife's place on the wall. The next morning, I woke up with the taste of ink in my mouth and a plan sitting on my nightstand, bound in black. And when I heard them laughing downstairs, light, practiced, untroubled, I didn't feel smaller. I felt precise. The presses at the factory had taught me that. Your job is not to shout louder than the machine. Your job is to measure, align, and apply force at the right time, in the right direction, with the right tool. I had my tool now. The next problem was finding the hand that knew where to strike. Morning announced itself with the soft click of cabinet doors I didn't recognize. Lisa had rearranged the kitchen again. The coffee tin, Maxwell House, the one I've bought since Reagan, was on the highest shelf, tucked behind a decorative bowl we never use. The mugs were in a new place, the plates rotated, the sugar swapped out for a glass jar of something labeled organic cane. I stood there with my hand lifted, feeling like a stranger reaching into someone else's closet. I wrote it down. 7:12 a.m. Coffee moved to top shelf. Aesthetic. Underlined twice. Daniel came in, tie knotted just a bit too tight, phone in hand. He nodded at me like a neighbor he doesn't fully remember. "Morning, morning," I said, still on my toes, retrieving the tin. My shoulder ached. I didn't ask for help. He poured water for Rusty and whistled him over. The dog's nails clicked on the tile, steady, happy, and he drank like thirst was simple. I envied him for that. Lisa drifted in on a ribbon of perfume, lavender that stuck to the back of the throat. She lifted a mug from the counter and flipped it over to check the base. "This one chips if it's stacked wrong," she said to no one specifically. "I move things so it looks more put together," I wrote. "Lavender 7:15, looks more put together." Then I stopped, because writing while they watched felt like confessing. By afternoon the changes spread. The old quilt Eleanor sewed from my work shirts, navy, charcoal, that one stubborn red square, was missing from the couch. In its place, a pale throw with tassels that shed onto my socks. The quilt turned up later in a plastic tub under the stairs, folded like a secret. I smoothed the fabric and felt the seams under my fingers like braille of a language I still understood. 11:23 a.m. Quilt removed, found in storage bin, winter decor. They never said, "We're moving you out of the picture." They said, "We're streamlining," and "You know how dust collects," and "Your things are safer in bins." The sentence that cut the deepest came smile-wrapped. "We just want the house to feel fresh. Fresh." As if breathing the same air as me went stale. The afternoon smelled different now, cleaner, chemical, lemon over something floral. When I opened the refrigerator, my leftovers were reincarnations, new containers, labels written in curly marker, chicken, pasta, nothing with my name. The little terracotta jar where Eleanor used to keep spare keys had been replaced by a ceramic bird that served no purpose I could find. "Lisa," I asked, "where'd the jar go?" She blinked with practiced patience. "That old thing? It chipped. We're simplifying. If you need a key, Daniel has a copy." I wrote 2:02 p.m. Key jar gone. Access route now through Daniel. Gatekeeping. I started using that word a lot. Gatekeeping. It sounded clinical, and clinical made it easier to swallow. The silence in the house had a new weight to it, like insulation that muffles without warming. The TV murmured most evenings, always on something light. Home renovation shows where people rip out the past in 30 minutes, reveal a future with white walls and plants that never die. Their soundtrack laughed for them. I sat at the edge of the room sometimes, just beyond the pool of lamplight, and watched their reflections move across the glass. If I didn't see my face in there, I wasn't surprised. I tried speaking more softly, then more clearly, then not at all. Words slid off like rain on sealed wood. Daniel had begun calling me guest as a joke, then not as a joke. "Guest towels are in the hall closet," he'd say, not looking up. Or, "Dad, guests don't adjust the thermostat." I'd built the wall that thermostat hung on. I sanded it. I painted it the summer Derek lost his first tooth. I wrote, "Thermostat 9:03 p.m. Guests don't touch. Ownership reframed as courtesy." One night I went to hang my flannel by the door where it's always lived. There was a new rack there, 4 matte black hooks. On the wall above it, a cursive sign read, "Welcome." My coat didn't look welcome under it. I carried it to my room instead. Evan hovered at my door sometimes, a shadow with a heartbeat. He'd knock gently, then stand in the frame as if afraid to step fully into my air. "You want anything, Grandpa?" he asked one evening. "Tell me something good from your day," I said. He shifted, hair falling into his eyes. "I drew in art. Ms. King said I have a steady hand." He didn't smile when he said it, as if he worried praise might be overheard and taxed. "Mom says I should do digital, not paper. Paper's messy." I set the notebook on my knee so he could see it. "Messy can be honest," I said. He nodded, eyes flicking to the hall, and then he was gone. I wrote, "Evan, steady hand. Protect this." The list grew. Towel with ease monogram missing. Linen closet. Bottom behind seasonal. Mail stacked in Daniel's office. My bank statement opened by mistake. Wi-Fi password changed. Told it's for security. Front porch chair moved to garage. Curb appeal. Call from neighbor Nancy. "Lisa asked if you were doing okay. Said you've been forgetful." I circled Nancy's line until the circle became a bruise. The first rumor is the seed, and once it's planted, everything that grows gets called a garden. At night I walked the hallway like a sentry. The frames still wore new faces, sunsets, eucalyptus leaves, quotes in print that said everything and meant nothing. But between two frames, above the baseboard, I noticed a smudge. The height was right, the width, the faint arch. I had rested my hand there for years as I turned toward the bedroom. Human oil becomes memory if you leave it long enough. I touched the wall without thinking and felt foolish for how relieved I was. In the bathroom, the cabinet smelled like polished mint. Lisa had organized it into little trays. Daniel, Lisa, Evan. I looked for my name and found guest, side, 2 cheap razors, a travel-size deodorant, a comb with teeth that bent. I held the comb and watched my hand shake. I don't know if it was anger or the small gravity of humiliation. I didn't write that one down. Not right away. I sat on the tub edge until my legs tingled, then went back to my room, opened the notebook, and wrote it in small letters, as if size would reduce pain. Bathroom, bin labeled guest. Then, in larger letters beneath, I live here. The house gave off new sounds I didn't know how to translate. The ice maker coughed like a throat clearing before a difficult conversation. The dryer beeped in a cheerful tone that made me feel scolded for wearing heavy clothes. Even Rusty's bark softened. He'd learned to keep his joy tidy. I found Eleanor's scarf, soft blue, thin as breath, stuffed in a drawer with a batch of charger cables. I pressed it to my face and felt the old scent of her, like a story the world still needed to hear. I put the scarf around my neck and sat on the bed, the notebook open, the page waiting. The line between documenting and mourning blurred. I wrote anyway. Paper doesn't flinch. That night I tried to pray. Not for outcomes, those are coin flips, but for a spine that didn't bend where it shouldn't. My words were plain. Help me keep what is mine without becoming what I hate. In the quiet after, the heater clicked on, and the vent breathed warm over my feet. Heat travels through hidden veins. So does resolve. By the end of the week, the notebook had a shape. Dates on the left, quotes indented, objects catalogued with a mechanic's precision. When I closed it, the elastic band snapped into place with a sound that felt like agreement. If they were building a version of the house where I didn't fit, I was building a record that I did. The wall I was making didn't show in paint. It rose in lines, in times, in names spelled correctly and phrases copied exactly. Brick by invisible brick, it stood between what they claimed and what I knew. And each note I added made it higher, steadier, quieter. The kind of wall that doesn't keep people out so much as keep a man in, intact, unedited, waiting for the moment to step through the door with the key only he remembered to carry. I took the suit from the back of the closet, the one that still held the shape of my shoulders if I shook it gently. Navy, 2-button, a little shiny at the elbows from years of church services and funerals. I laid it on the bed and smoothed the fabric with my palm until the seams remembered me. The mirror didn't lie. The collar sat high, the tie trembled when I tried to knot it. I did it again, slower, until the knot settled like a small decision. At breakfast, I kept my voice even. "I'm going to the bank," I said, sliding my old leather wallet into the inside pocket like a ritual. Daniel glanced at the suit. "You don't need to dress up for the bank, Dad." "Old habits," I said. Lisa's smile was quick. "Text if you get confused with anything," she said, like she was offering me a lifeline. Her perfume followed the sentence out of the room. I nodded, took my coat, and stepped into the cold. The December air hit with a clean sting that uncluttered the head. The sidewalk had the thin shine of ice, and the sun was too bright for the temperature, the kind of winter trick that makes you squint and trust your feet more than your eyes. I waited for bus 52, with my hands inside my coat, feeling the square weight of the notebook against my ribs. Paper warms slowly. On the ride downtown, Scranton slid past in little museums of glass. Diners with fogged windows, a pawn shop crowded with instruments and a single wedding dress in the corner, a closed bookstore with a handwritten note that began, "Back soon," and probably meant, "Back never." I watched my reflection ride over all of it, tie straight, shoulders squared as far as they could go. I breathed in through my nose and held it. I didn't feel young. I felt precise. Holland and Weaver sat behind a row of bare trees, brick trimmed with white, a building that looked like it told the truth, even when it was tired. The door opened on a bell that didn't tinkle so much as announce. Inside, carpet that softened footsteps. A front desk with a bowl of peppermint candies, the smell of paper and coffee, and something faintly citrus. The receptionist looked up with the kind of attention people use to save for elders. "Good morning," she said. "Do you have an appointment?" "Not yet," I said. "Name's Joseph Benton. I was hoping to speak with Ms. Weaver." She checked a screen and lifted the phone. Her voice lowered. "He's here." "Yes, thank you." Then to me, "She'll see you. Third door on the left." I counted my steps. 1, 2, 3. Elaine Weaver stood before a bookcase that looked used, not decorative. Spines faded, corners bent, the kind of wear that proves hands and time. She was mid-50s, short, dark hair tucked behind one ear, glasses on a cord like a pendulum of readiness. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Mr. Benton," she said, voice warm but spare, "I'm glad you came." I handed her the folder. She didn't rush. She held it the way you hold something someone's heart has been living inside. I told it straight. The moved photos, the quilt in a bin, the bathroom tray labeled guest, the dog in my chair, the phrases that cut and then pretended to be jokes. I told her about the notebook, the dates, the times, the quotes copied exactly. I told her how the house sounded different now, how even the heater's breath felt like it belonged to someone else. Elaine didn't interrupt. She took notes in a narrow, tidy hand. When I paused, she asked questions that didn't feel like traps. Utilities are in whose name? When did you last see the deed? Who opens the mail? Why? Not who, when, where. Questions that built corners, not holes. I placed the notebook on her desk and opened it to my index. She turned pages slowly, one fingertip at the edge, like she was trying not to bruise anything. Sometimes she smiled without joy, recognition, not amusement. When she reached the entry about the bank statement opened by mistake, she nodded, as if a line had clicked into place. "Gatekeeping," I said. "Exactly," she answered. She asked if I felt safe. I said yes, then clarified, "Safe enough," but erased. Her eyes softened in a way that didn't pity. "Erasure can be a kind of harm," she said. "Our law likes paper. So do judges. You have paper." She explained things I'd half read and not fully understood. Notice requirements, standards for removal, the difference between tenancy and license. The phrase, "quiet title," that sounded like a prayer whispered to wood. She spoke like a mechanic for the law, no jargon for its own sake, just parts, talk, fit. "You are the owner of record," she said, tapping the deed copy. "Ownership includes the right to exclude. The people benefiting from your hospitality have repackaged it as entitlement." That sentence sat inside me like an anchor finding bottom. She looked at my file again. "We'll start simple. A formal notice. There are ways to be firm without being cruel." She paused. "You have more evidence than most people who come in like you. Most come with memory alone. You came with record. That matters." I didn't realize I'd been gripping my knees until I felt my fingers unclench. "I'm not trying to hurt them," I said. My voice sounded dusty. "I want the truth to be visible again." Elaine folded her hands. "Dignity isn't aggression," she said. "Let's put your house back in the same sentence as your name." She drafted while I watched. Hearing my name in the formal language steadied me. Benton Joseph L., owner of record. It lacked poetry. It had weight. She printed 2 copies and slid them to me to sign. The pen felt heavier than it should, but it sat well. I wrote my full name slowly, in the hand Eleanor liked because it never rushed. "Next," she said, "if they escalate, which often happens, we document, we escalate properly. Do not argue. Do not shout. Do not touch anything you don't need to. Let your paper speak first. If you feel unwell or they suggest you're confused, we get you a current medical evaluation. Judges like recent dates." She waited a beat. "Do you have a doctor?" "Yes," I said. "I'll schedule it." She nodded. "Good. And Mr. Benton, if they make you doubt yourself, call me before you doubt." Something unspooled inside me, not relief exactly, recognition. The feeling you get when someone speaks the dialect you've been thinking in and didn't know had a name. We shook hands. Her grip was dry, firm, human. No ceremony. The receptionist offered me a peppermint on the way out. I took one and left it wrapped in my coat pocket like a marker in time. Outside, the cold had sharpened. It didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt like clean space. The bus shelter glass held my reflection again, tie in place, eyes steadier. I opened the folder and read the first line of the notice. It didn't celebrate. It didn't threaten. It simply stood. Sometimes that's all a man needs, something that stands. On the ride home, the city looked the same but less loud. Colors kept their edges. The courthouse clock blinked to the hour and I wrote it down without thinking. Habit had become structure. Structure had become spine. When I stepped back onto Willow Creek Lane, I could already hear the TV in our living room, laughter floating easy as steam. I thought of the heater's breath, the labeled bins, the welcome sign above the hooks. I felt my hand open and close once around the folder's spine, and the movement wasn't nervous. It was measuring. I didn't walk faster. I didn't walk slower. I walked like a man who had somewhere to put his weight. For the first time in a long while, strategy didn't sound like a word other people used. It sounded like the quiet in my chest when a machine finally falls into rhythm. I wasn't coming home to ask for space. I was coming back to take my place. The letter left my hands at 9:17 a.m. I wrote the time in the notebook because moments matter when people start pretending they don't remember them. By 6:03 p.m., the house knew. Daniel held the paper like it might bite him. His voice went high, the way it did when he lied as a kid. "You're evicting us? Your own son?" He laughed once, hard and empty. "You've lost it, Dad. This is insane." Lisa didn't laugh. She went straight to wounded. "After everything we've done for you," she said, hand to her chest like a stage cue. "We feed you. We keep this place running, and you repay us with legal threats?" "I'm putting things in writing," I said. "That's all." Lisa's eyes moved over my face like she was fitting me for a diagnosis. "We need to talk about your memory," she said softly, like a nurse. "You've been confused." "I remember enough," I said. They moved quickly after that. Not the big things. No shouting matches, no slammed doors, small cuts where you don't notice the blood right away. My morning pills were not where I left them. 2 white tablets looked slightly different. Edges blunt, coating dull. I took a photo, circled the difference in pen, and put the bottle in my pocket. I bought a replacement from the pharmacy and kept both, labeled, in a Ziploc. Evidence becomes a habit like anger does. One breaks things, the other builds. The mail shifted too. Envelopes started arriving already opened, flap lifted and pressed back down. "It must have torn in the box," Daniel said without meeting my eyes. One afternoon, the mailbox was empty. At dinner, Lisa mentioned a bill I hadn't seen. "It came earlier," she said. "I filed it so you wouldn't misplace it." I wrote, "Mail intercepted, ask USPS to hold and pick up in person." I went for the hold request the next morning and added the clerk's name and time to my notes. When the next delivery came stamped, "Hold for pickup," I felt something settle inside me, a quiet click of a gear engaging. The neighbors started looking at me with that soft concern people dress cruelty in. Nancy from across the street said, "Lisa told me you've been a bit forgetful lately. If you ever need help, I'll ask," I said, and left it there. I wrote Nancy's words down exactly when I got home, quotation marks like fence posts. In the living room, I placed a tiny camera on the bookshelf, lens hiding in the shadow of a black picture frame. It caught the room in a clean, wide angle, doorway, couch, my chair-turned dog bed, the table where paperwork landed by mistake. I didn't announce it. I didn't hide it with malice either. I thought of it as another witness, the kind that doesn't flinch when voices go sweet to sharpen the blade. I also bought a small voice recorder. Fits in the palm, light as a peppermint. The first time I clicked it on in my pocket, the red light felt like a nerve. I tucked the files each night onto a blue USB drive and labeled the folder by date. House. Audio. 12/14. The act of naming made the day hold still. The recordings were mostly ordinary. Dishes, TV laughter, the small weather of house sounds. But then came the edges. Lisa. He signed something at the bank. He told me. He doesn't understand what he's doing. Daniel. If he wants to play hardball, we can call Elaine ourselves. Say he's not competent. Lisa. Better. Call Dr. Elkins. Ask if he's been seen. Say you're worried. Daniel. You call. He likes you. I pressed the notebook open so hard the spine popped. I wrote down their lines word for word, then sat very still until my breath learned how to move again. I scheduled the appointment with Dr. Raymond Elkins before breakfast the next day. I didn't ask for a ride. I didn't mention it. In the waiting room at St. Luke's, the air smelled like sanitizer and old magazines. A TV on the wall murmured about winter storms. When Dr. Elkins called my name, he took my hand in both of his, warm, steady, and guided me back. He'd known me since Eleanor's last year. Grief had made me a regular. We ran through the questions. What day is it? Count backward by sevens. Remember these 3 words, candle, river, stone, and tell me later. He switched to the parts that matter if you've lived a life. Talk me through your house, your bills, your routine. I told him the truth without sharpening it. He listened like a clockmaker listens to a tick. When he asked me to draw a clock, I drew mine from the kitchen. Hairline crack at the 4, minute hand a little fatter where I repaired it with glue. He smiled at that detail, not because it was clever, but because it was true. When we were done, he rolled closer on his stool. Joe, he said, your recall is intact. Your orientation is intact. You're not just lucid, you're careful. I'm writing the report today. Cognitively sound. No evidence of dementia or acute impairment. You want a copy? Yes, I said. He printed it while I waited. The printer breathed warm on the pages. 2 sheets, staple left corner. He handed them to me like a passport. If anyone suggests otherwise, he said, tell them to read. On my way out, I saw Lisa's name appear on my phone. I let it ring. I listened to the voicemail in the bus shelter while snow dusted the bench. Joe, it's me, she said. Voice dipped in concern. Daniel and I are we're worried. You've been so stubborn. Maybe you don't realize. We can help make decisions. Just bring the papers to us before you get confused. I saved the message, then wrote, VM, Lisa, before you get confused. 11:41 a.m. Facts keep their shape even when tone tries to dress them. Back home, Evan met me at the door, shoulders a little squared in a way I recognized from my own father. You okay, Grandpa? He asked. I am, I said. I meant it. He glanced toward the living room where voices rose, then lowered. If you need me, he said, and didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That evening, the house played polite. Lisa made soup. Daniel asked about my day without listening for the answer. I recorded the room breathing. Later, alone, I opened the footage. The camera had caught them at the table with the mail spread between them, my name visible on 2 envelopes. Lisa lifted one, slit already broken, and slid the letter into her planner. Daniel said, he won't notice. She said, he'll feel it, but he won't notice. I paused the video and stared at my own chair in the corner of the frame, the blanket smooth where Rusty slept. The still image felt like a diagram of a story I'd finally learned to read. I printed the Elkins report and placed one copy in the front of my folder, the other in a new plastic sleeve marked Medical Current. I labeled the blue USB in thick black letters. Evidence. The word looked too dramatic until I remembered who had taught me to prefer plain names. The factory, the ledger, the line item that proves where the time went. I locked the folder with a rubber band that once held a bundle of shop invoices. Rubber remembers shape. So do men, if you give them something to hold. Before bed, I sat with Eleanor's photo and told her what I had done. Not every step, just the shape of it. "It isn't war," I said softly. "It's weatherproofing." I could almost hear her laugh, the one that meant, "You found your footing again." Downstairs, the TV filled the room with a thin lake of light. Daniel and Lisa kept their voices low. The house made the night noises a house makes. Pipes settling like old bones, wind threading itself through the gap at the back door. Rusty sighed in his sleep. I slid the Elkins report and the blue USB into the brown folder and set it in the drawer beside my bed. The sound the drawer made, wood on wood, slow and final, felt like a bar across a door. Armor doesn't have to shine. Sometimes it's paper, plastic, ink, timestamps, and a man's name written the same way it's always been written, steady as a press coming down true. The courthouse smelled like old paper and wet wool. People shook snow from their coats in the hallway, and the floor kept a thin shine that reflected shoes and nerves. I arrived early and sat on a wooden bench that felt like it knew every kind of waiting a person can do. I kept my folder on my lap, the brown one, thumb along the spine, the way a man holds a level against a beam. Across from me, a posted sign read, "Lackawanna County Court of Common Pleas." I read it 3 times, as if the words might rearrange and send me home. "Case 32, a clerk said, voice soft but trained to carry. "Benton vs. Benton." The room itself was colder than the hall. High ceiling, flags stilled. The clock over the door clicked with a slow, square sound. The benches brought out the same posture in everyone, backs straighter, faces composed. Daniel sat at the table to my left with Lisa beside him, both in dark suits, both looking like people who had practiced being reasonable in a mirror. My hands didn't shake. They felt heavy, like tools. Judge Margaret Donnelly entered without drama, and the room stood as one. She was early 60s, silver hair pulled back, expression that wasted no motion. "Good morning," she said. The sound of chairs settling was the first movement of the day's machinery. Elaine leaned toward me. "Breathe," she whispered, not as advice, but as a reminder that lungs exist. The bailiff called for order. The opening minutes felt like the tightening of bolts. Names confirmed, counsel recognized, exhibits marked. When I heard plaintiff, Mr. Joseph L. Benton, owner of record, my body made a small interior correction like a frame-finding plum. Daniel went first. He spoke in a voice I knew from his open houses, confident, polished, selling a feeling. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a misunderstanding inside a family. My father has been struggling. He suffers memory lapses. We've done our best to care for him, but now he's confused about documents and—" He gestured vaguely at the world. "Making decisions that are not in his best interest." Lisa followed, eyes damp at the edges, hands folded like prayer staged for a camera. "We love him," she said. "He lives with us because we want him close. We reorganize the house for his safety. He misplaces things. He forgets conversations. He gets upset when we try to help." She let the last word fall like a gift. Elaine didn't move for a long second, letting their words sit where they landed. Then she stood. "Your Honor, the record will show my client is the owner of the property in question. He is not a tenant. He has not invited new co-owners into his deed." Her voice was plain and exact. She lifted a page. "We submit plaintiff's medical evaluation by Dr. Raymond Elkins, St. Luke's Hospital, dated last week. Findings: cognitively sound, oriented, capable of managing personal affairs." Judge Donnelly read without expression. "Admitted," she said, and slid the paper to her left. Elaine continued, placing the blue USB next to the document like a quiet twin. "We also submit audio and video excerpts, lawfully recorded in common areas, demonstrating interference with Mr. Benton's mail and a pattern of diminishment meant to create the appearance of incompetence. Daniel shifted in his chair. Lisa smoothed her skirt. I heard the clock climb 1 more minute. The first clip played on a small screen turned toward the bench. We could all hear it through the courtroom speakers, low volume, clear. Lisa's voice. If he wants to play hardball, we can call Elaine ourselves, say he's not competent. Daniel. If he wants to play hardball, we can call Elaine ourselves, say he's not competent. Lisa again. Better. Call Dr. Elkins. Ask if he's been seen. Say you're worried. Then Daniel. You call. He likes you. No one spoke. The sound of paper in the gallery made a dry winter sound. Elaine cued a second clip. Envelopes on the dining table. My name visible. Lisa. He'll feel it, but he won't notice. Daniel. He won't notice. Elaine paused the frame where my name sat in the corner like a small flag. The judge's pen tapped the legal pad twice. She looked at Daniel and Lisa with a gaze that could hold water still. Counselors, do you dispute the authenticity of these recordings? She asked their attorney. He coughed into his fist. No, Your Honor, but context will be considered, she said. The pen stopped tapping. Elaine handed up my notebook, open to the index, the handwriting squared and dated. Mr. Benton has kept contemporaneous notes, times, statements, object movements. We submit exhibits A through G, including photographs of items removed, family photos, the quilt, personal effects, paired with witness statements from neighbors regarding remarks about alleged forgetfulness. We also submit USPS hold receipts demonstrating mail diversion. I watched the judge read my handwriting as if it were a person sitting beside me. She traced a line with her eyes, then another. This is thorough, she said, not to flatter, but to anchor. When it was my turn to speak, I did not practice heroics. I told her the same thing I told Elaine. I'm not trying to hurt my son, I said. The microphone made my voice sound closer than I felt. I am trying to live where I live, without being erased inside it. Judge Donnelly's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. It relaxed a notch, like a joint sliding back into socket. She asked me simple questions. Who pays the utilities? I do. Whose name is on the deed? Mine. Do you have a current medical evaluation? Yes. Elaine handed it up again. The judge nodded once as if to say, I can read, and I just did. Daniel tried to regain ground. Your Honor, if my father would just sign the house over, we'd avoid all this. We've invested in improvements, new furniture, a full repaint, kitchen organization. We've been acting as caretakers. Elaine didn't raise her voice. Caretaking is not conversion, she said, and organization is not ownership. The right to exclude is not cruelty when exercised by the owner. Lisa stood as if pulled. We aren't villains, she said, eyes shining. He's old. We wanted order. Order for whom? Judge Donnelly asked, not unkindly. No one answered. The judge glanced at the clock, then at us. Here is what the record shows, she said, voice even as winter light. Mr. Benton is the owner of record. He is cognitively sound by recent medical evaluation. He has presented documentary, audio, and video evidence of interference with his mail and routine, and a pattern of statements designed to undermine his credibility. He has provided notice. He has comported himself with dignity. She turned to Daniel and Lisa. You have, at best, conflated convenience with authority. The words found the exact studs inside the wall. I didn't move. I didn't exhale. I just listened. She set her pen down. The court grants the relief requested. Respondents are ordered to vacate the premises within the statutory period. No further interference with plaintiff's mail or person is permitted. Any suggestion of incompetence is belied by the record before me. She paused, then added, Family disputes are hard. But the law has a simple spine, names on paper, dates, rights, today it holds. The sound that followed was small, the bailiff's shoes, a cough in the gallery, the distant elevator. The gavel didn't thunder. It sounded like a fist closing around a loose thread and pulling it clean. Daniel stared at the table. Lisa's mouth was a line that tried to be many things and settled on nothing. Elaine touched my elbow, a brief, human check-in. "You did what you came to do," she said. I nodded because words were a size I couldn't wear yet. When we stood, my knees remembered that they were old, but my back remembered it had a job. Outside the courtroom, the hall felt warmer. The same people shook the same snow from their coats, but the air had more oxygen in it. As we walked toward the doors, I heard the clock in the courtroom strike the hour. 1, 2, 3, measured, final. It followed me out into the clear cold, where the breath you see leaving you is only proof that you are still warm inside. The courthouse air still clung to my coat the morning I walked into the Recorder of Deeds. The building had that quiet municipal smell. Paper warmed by radiators, winter coats drying in patches, a faint trace of toner and coffee. I took a number, sat in a plastic chair, and held the brown folder on my knees the way you hold something you've already decided to give away. Not because you don't want it, because you finally know what it's for. When my turn came, a clerk named Morales greeted me with a steady nod. "Morning, sir. What can we do for you?" "I'm transferring title," I said. The words didn't wobble. "To a foundation." He glanced at the deed copy, then at me. "Silver Shelter Foundation," he read. "Good work, these folks. You sure?" "Very," I said. "It's time this house keeps more people warm than just us." He showed me where to sign. My hand moved slow, careful, as if the ink itself were a kind of blessing. Joseph L. Benton. The name that built the walls now set them loose on a wider purpose. Morales notarized with a stamp that thunked through the paper like a heartbeat. Carbon copies, receipts, a checklist, no trumpets, just the small machinery of a promise kept. Outside, the cold felt gentle. Snow carried the kind of hush that makes streets look considerate. I stood a minute on the steps and let the air rinse the courtroom sounds from my ears. Then I called the number Elaine had given me for Silver Shelter. A woman named Carla picked up on the second ring, voice bright without being loud. "Mr. Benton, we're honored," she said after I explained. "We'll coordinate repairs, the intake list, an on-site manager. We always invite donors to leave something. Words for the first resident, if you'd like." Words. I told her I'd think of the right ones. Back on Willow Creek Lane, the house wore its ordinary face. Same siding, same porch, same welcome mat I never picked. But something in its posture had changed, the way a man stands different once he remembers his spine. I opened the door, and the air met me with lemon and lavender and heat from the vent. The TV murmured in the living room. A planner lay open on the table. I set the folder down as if it were a quiet bell. Daniel came in from the hallway, tie loosened, eyes scanning my hands like a customs officer. "Where'd you go?" he asked. "Downtown," I said. "For what?" "Paperwork," I said. He waited for the rest. I gave it to him clean. I transferred the house to a foundation, the Silver Shelter. They help older folks who need a place. Silence has flavors. This one tasted like metal. "You did what?" His voice didn't rise. It thinned. "Dad, this is our house." It was mine. It's still my decision. I kept my tone level, the way Elaine taught me to keep the carriage steady, even when the road buckles. "Now it's a place that won't be used to make anyone small." Lisa drifted in, her perfume arriving first. "You can't be serious," she said, a laugh clipped short at the edge. "After all, after everything we've invested." "Paint isn't inheritance," I said. "Neither is rearranging furniture." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Why? Just tell me why." I looked past him toward the hallway, where I'd put Eleanor's photo back and felt her steady me. "Because a house that forgets becomes a container." Because family isn't who inherits the deed. It's who guards the dignity inside the door. I let the words sit. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting this place from becoming a tool. He swallowed. For a second, boy Daniel blinked through. The one who used to fall asleep on my chest during late games, his breath dampening my collar. Then the man returned, the one who knew how to stage a room so strangers could imagine themselves there. "And where does that leave us?" he asked. "Where you choose to stand," I said. "Not in a house with my name, but maybe in a room where we speak to each other without erasing." Lisa's mouth curved like a question mark that forgot its question. "You can't just—" "I already did," I said, not to sting, only to end a sentence that had dragged too long. I didn't ask them to leave. The court had set the terms, and the calendar was already eating days. Instead, I turned to the quiet work of converting a building back into a story. In the garage, I opened the cardboard box and lifted Eleanor's frames one by one. Glass caught the winter light and threw it gentle against the walls. Ocean City, Maryland, her hair in the wind, the backyard, dirt under her nails, the thin crescent of sun on her wristwatch. I hung them where they had lived, and the house exhaled a little, like a person recognizing their own handwriting. The quilt came out next. Navy, charcoal, the stubborn red square. I smoothed it over the back of the couch and felt seams under my palm like Braille saying, "Still ours." Rusty trotted over, sniffed it, circled twice, then lay down with his chin on the edge like he understood seniority. I scratched behind his ear. "Good boy," I said. He thumped his tail once and stayed. I cleared the coffee table of glossy magazines we never read and set Eleanor's terracotta key jar in the middle. A small ceremony. 2 spare keys inside, the lid tapping a familiar music. In the kitchen, I brought the Maxwell house down from the top shelf and tucked Lisa's canister, that elegant ceramic bird, beside the toaster where it could be pretty without being in the way. I poured grounds, let the machine breathe that old, honest smell. Coffee rose through the rooms like a testimony. Then I lit the fireplace, not for show, for heat, for memory. The first match flared too fast and died out. The second took, flame walking along kindling like it had been invited back. When the wood caught, the room's temperature shifted from functional to human. Shadows left their corners and started telling better stories. From the hallway came Evan's steps, hesitant, then sure. He stood in the doorway, hands in pockets. "Smells like when Grandma used to make cocoa," he said. "It'll smell like that again," I answered. He sat on the rug without asking, a boy's privilege I was grateful to see survive. "Mom's upset," he said. "Not as a complaint, just as a weather report." "I know," I said. "People get wet when it finally rains." He nodded like he'd file that away. "Is it true about the house?" "It is," I said. "It's going to help people who need it. That's the best use I can think of." He looked at the fire a while. "I drew today," he said softly. "Ms. King says paper remembers." "So do walls," I said, "if you hang the right thing on them." Night came on the way winter nights do. Quick, decisive, the windows turning from mirrors into small, dark lakes. I stood and changed the bulbs back to the warm ones Lisa had boxed up, letting the light find its old tone. The rooms looked like themselves again, only less certain they belonged to one life alone. That felt right. I wrote a note for Silver Shelter, like Carla suggested. On a lined card I kept in my desk, I printed, "If you sit by this fire feeling small, know that this house is on your side. Let the walls keep the weather out and your name in." I placed the card beneath Eleanor's photo, tucked enough to wait, visible enough to be found when it was time. Before bed I walked the hallway slowly, not to audit, just to appreciate. The smudge by the baseboard, the place my hand used to rest, was still there, quieter now under fresh paint, but present. I touched it like a relic and felt ridiculous and holy at once. In our room, I set the brown folder in the drawer again, lighter by one house and heavier by what that surrender meant. The drawer slid shut with that same wood sound, softened somehow, as if even the furniture understood we'd taken the weight off the wrong beam. Downstairs, the fire murmured. Rusty's breath settled into dog sleep. The thermostat clicked and didn't argue with me. I took Eleanor's scarf from the chair and draped it over the frame of her garden portrait. The blue looked like a ribbon the night had tied to remember us by. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, where years ago a tiny crack sketched a river we never fixed. It was still there, not a flaw, proof that houses, like people, stay honest when they keep their lines. For the first time in a long time, I felt the air of home fill my chest without asking permission. Not triumph, not victory. Just a room that didn't insist I disappear to make space for its comfort. Morning would come with paperwork and packing and the awkward dance of parting. But that night, the house finally belonged to its purpose, and I slept like a man who had opened a door and found that it did, in fact, lead outside. The news didn't come as a phone call or a confrontation. It came on page 6 of the Scranton Times, bottom left, beneath the fold, a small rental listing and a notice of address change. D. Benton, Elmore Benton, forwarding to Wilkes Bar. 2 lines and a zip code. I read them twice, then a third time, as if repetition might turn them into something else. It didn't. It just made the paper go soft where my thumb held it. There was no pleasure in it. Relief, yes, the kind that settles in the ribs like heat after a long breath in cold air. But not the sharp sweetness of winning. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like a storm had moved east and the roof had held, and now there was the quiet work of drying out what had gotten wet. I set the paper beside my coffee and looked at the window. The street outside wore winter the way old bones wear a coat. Politely, with a little creak. A salt truck had come through before dawn, leaving 2 pale lines down the middle of Willow Creek Lane. Rusty thumped his tail twice and put his chin on my shoe. I scratched behind his ear and thought of Daniel lifting boxes into a borrowed truck, Lisa taping the last lid, the 2 of them calling it a fresh start, a temporary setback, anything but a consequence. I didn't wish them pain. I wished them a room with no lies in it. Round noon, I folded the paper and put it on the bookshelf, tucked near Eleanor's garden photo. I told her out loud, "They're moving," and the sound of my voice didn't echo. It just fit the room. Then I put on my coat and walked to a cafe on Birchwood called Maple and Steam, the kind of place where the menu is written in chalk and the cups never match. The bell over the door sounded like someone had tuned it by ear. Coffee smelled like it still knew what a kitchen is. Evan was already there, hood up, a sketchbook under his arm. He stood when he saw me, then seemed to remember he didn't have to. He smiled without showing teeth. "Grandpa." "Hey, kid," I said, and we did the kind of hug boys and men do when they're learning how not to be embarrassed by tenderness. We sat by the window. He ordered tea with too much honey. I got an Earl Grey because it reminded me of Eleanor on Sunday afternoons. Steam catching the light, like a small miracle. Outside, people walked with their heads tipped into the wind, faces folded into winter shapes. Inside, the sound was spoons, soft talk, a grinder rising and falling like a tide. "How's Wilkes Bar?" I asked gently, not to pry. "Smaller," he said, "quieter. The heat clicks off at night sometimes, and Dad swears he'll talk to the landlord, then forgets." He fiddled with the string of his tea bag. Mum put sticky notes everywhere now. On the fridge, on the door, on her laptop. "Call cable, pay gas, buy dog food." He looked up. "They couldn't take Rusty. Lease says no dogs. He's better with you anyway." I nodded. We let the truth sit between us without sharpening it. He opened the sketchbook and slid a page toward me. Graphite on heavy paper, patient lines. A man at a kitchen table, shoulders square, hands quiet, the dog on the floor at his feet, looking up. A chair by the window. Empty, not abandoned, light from the left, just enough to say morning. The perspective was a little high, like someone standing at the doorway watching and deciding to draw instead of interrupt. The title in small letters at the bottom, Place. My throat tightened in that private way a man hopes no one notices. "You did this?" I asked, though of course it had his steadiness. He nodded. "Ms. King says composition is a kind of ethics. Where you put things tells people what you think matters." He glanced at me, then away. "I wanted the dog on the floor. I wanted you at the table." I ran my finger just above the paper, not touching the lines. "You see more than people think," I said. He shrugged. "It's easier when you're quiet." We sat with the drawing a while. I found Eleanor in it, though she wasn't there, found her in the way the table didn't crowd the man, in the gentle slope of the light, in the empty chair that didn't feel like a threat, but an invitation. I thought about how justice can look like furniture arranged differently. "Do you hate them?" Evan asked suddenly, voice smaller than the question. "No," I said, and meant it. Hate's a big tool for a small problem. I don't even think this was always a problem. It became one slowly, in the same way snow becomes a drift. You don't notice until you're pushing against it. He rolled the T-string around his finger, then let it unwind. "They say you ruined everything," he said, not as an accusation, just as part of a report. "I kept the walls honest," I said. "People can feel ruined by honesty if they've been leaning on a lie. I did my leaning too, for years. On work, on silence, on the belief that time would fix what I didn't face." He watched the window for a long blink. "Mom says you embarrassed them in court." "Court isn't for pride," I said. "It's for names and dates. Embarrassment is what happens when the truth arrives in front of people." He nodded. "Ms. King says truth draws straight even when your hand shakes." I smiled. "She sounds like someone who's hung a lot of pictures." He turned another page. Thumbnails of hands, practice lines, a dog sleeping face in 3 angles. "I want to keep coming by," he said, quick. If he said it slowly, it might sound like a request he could be denied. "If that's okay." "It's not just okay," I said. "It's good. There's wood in the shed that needs sanding. Your steady hand could help." He smiled with his whole face then, 13 and 15 at the same time. "You'll let me use the sander?" "I'll make you measure twice," I said. "That's better than a sander." We ate simple lunches. Soup that tasted like someone had cared about onions at the beginning, bread with butter that remembered cows. When we left, the air had softened by a degree only the face can measure. He walked me to the corner and then back the other way toward a bus. At the curb, he said, "I don't know what to do when they talk about you." "You don't owe anyone a defense of me," I said. "You owe yourself a way to stay kind without being tricked. That's harder. If you don't know what to say, draw. Paper doesn't make speeches." He nodded like he could use that on Monday. Back home, I put the drawing on the mantel for a minute, just to see. The room accepted it. The dog looked at his paper self and didn't object. I felt myself do something I hadn't done in years. I asked the room a question and waited for an answer. The answer was quiet but clear. "Yes, here." I framed the drawing in the evening in a simple black frame I had in the basement, the kind with clips that always bite your thumb if you're careless. I wasn't careless. I hung it above the table by the window, where morning light could give it the same light it had been drawn in. When I stepped back, the wall told the story out loud. Eleanor in her garden, the boys drawing, the house breathing between them. Later, I opened the paper again and read the listing a 4th time, as if repetition could shift it from loss to lesson. 2-bedroom apartment, heat included. I pictured Daniel calculating square footage, even with his eyes closed, Lisa arranging their cups just so on a counter that didn't remember them. I hoped the radiator knocked gently at night and taught them how to listen. I hoped the windows stuck a little so they'd learn to lift with both hands. The phone stayed quiet. I let it. Sometimes peace sounds like a thing you forgot to turn on. Before bed, I walked the hallway and touched the smudge by the baseboard, a reflex that had become ritual and then something less dramatic, just a man greeting his own house. In our room, I told Eleanor, he draws with a steady hand, and I could feel her answer in the way my shoulders lowered. Rusty settled by the bed and exhaled a dog's definition of trust. I turned off the light and let the dark be soft for once. There was no triumph playing inside my head, no victory parade, just the kind of silence that doesn't erase you, the kind that holds a shape. People think love needs closeness to live. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it learns to breathe in another zip code, in a cafe at lunchtime, in the space between a question and a patient answer. Dignity travels that way too. You carry it like a folded paper in your pocket, and when someone asks for proof, you unfold it carefully and let the light read it. I fell asleep with the drawing on the wall and the house listening. If there was a lesson loud enough to say out loud, it was quiet in its words. Justice isn't the moment someone else falls. It's the moment you stop falling with them. The light on Willow Creek Lane changes slower now. Evening doesn't fall, it drifts. The sun slides through the bare branches across the street and lands soft against the windows, turning everything the color of honey left too long in the jar. I keep the curtains open so I can watch it crawl across the floorboards. Eleanor and I laid ourselves 40 years ago. The grain still catches the light the same way. It just has more stories to tell. The house is quieter these days, but it's not the silence of absence. It's the kind that respects itself. The Silver Shelter team visits twice a week. Carla brings papers for me to sign, checks on the heater, and talks about the first tenant who'll move in when spring arrives. For now, they let me stay on as caretaker. Guardian, she calls it, as if I'm standing watch over something holy instead of dust and memories. I like the word. Guardian. It means you're trusted with keeping the light on, not owning it. Today, I spent the morning sanding the arms of my chair, the old wooden one from the corner by the window. The same chair that once held humiliation like a stain now holds polish and patience. The surface is smooth again. The small split near the leg has been filled, sealed and left honest. A faint line that says, it broke, and then it didn't. When I run my hand over it, I can still feel the weight of that night years ago. The laughter, the scrape of wood on tile. But it no longer stings. It's history now, not hurt. Rusty is older too. His muzzle's gone white around the edges, but his eyes still glow when the kettle whistles. He sleeps beside me on the rug, sometimes twitching at the sound of dreams only dogs get to have. I tell him he's earned every one of them. He sighs like he agrees. On the small table next to the chair, Eleanor's photo leans against a vase of dried lavender. She's smiling in her garden, hands in soil, hair wild from the wind. I still talk to her quietly. I tell her about Evan's sketches, about the letter from the foundation thanking me for acts of courage and civic grace. She would laugh at that phrase, civic grace, and say, "Joe, they make bravery sound like paperwork." Maybe that's all it ever was, the paperwork of the soul, doing the necessary things with steady hands, even when your heart shakes. The clock above the mantel ticks without hurry. For years that sound annoyed me. Now it keeps time with my breathing. Through the open window, I can hear the church bell from St. Matthew's a few blocks over. 7 slow tolls. The echo runs down the street, meets the hum of a neighbor's mower, the bark of a dog 2 doors down. Ordinary life, unsharpened. I didn't think I'd get to hear it again without flinching. When the wind slips through the window screen, it carries faint traces of wood smoke and cold metal, the smell of my old factory days. It doesn't sting anymore either. Work built me, then bent me, then left me. But it also taught me that everything, even metal, can be shaped again if you apply steady pressure in the right place. Maybe people are the same. Evan visits on Saturdays. He brings new drawings sometimes. Hands, tools, dogs, faces that look like honesty. We don't talk much about Daniel and Lisa. They're still in Wilkes Bar, finding whatever rhythm life will allow. I send them cards for holidays with no return address, just my name. Not forgiveness, not defiance, just proof that I'm still writing. This afternoon, Evan helped me hang a small sign by the door for the Silver Shelter staff. A simple metal plate engraved, "The Benton House, for rest and dignity." He held the screwdriver, careful and sure. When it was done, we stepped back and looked at it. "You named it after you," he said. "No," I told him. "I named it after what I learned here." He smiled, and that was enough. As twilight deepens, I light the fire. The first crackle sends warmth crawling up the chimney, like memory taking shape. Shadows dance along the walls, where Eleanor's pictures hang, and I sit in the chair, the same one that once bore my weight with embarrassment, now carrying me with ease. The dog curls at my feet, tail resting against my boot. The air moves gently, shifting between the smell of coffee, wood smoke, and lavender. Every scent that ever told me I was home. I think about the word revenge. It doesn't belong here anymore. What happened wasn't vengeance. It was correction. A slow restoration, like sanding down a rough edge until it fits clean again. People call that forgiveness sometimes, but I think it's simpler. It's maintenance. Keeping your shape so the next person who leans on you doesn't find splinters. Out the window, kids ride bikes down the lane, their laughter unburdened by history. One of them stops to look at the house, maybe curious about the sign. I wave. He waves back, and for a moment, the distance between all generations feels like nothing more than air and time doing their usual work. I take a long breath. The fire hums. Rusty dreams. The photo frame glints with the last gold of day. My hands rest on the arms of the chair, these same hands that once built engines, fixed leaks, signed deeds, let go of walls, and still know how to hold. I close my eyes, not from tiredness but from fullness, the kind of quiet that fills a man, not empties him. The kind of peace that doesn't need witnesses. If there's anything left to say, it's not a speech. It's a small truth folded neatly. Sometimes you don't win by keeping what's yours. You win by leaving it better. If you've ever had to start again, tell me where you're watching from. Maybe we'll keep each other company for a while.